time for a tune called Grating Honey. It's a single. I haven't done a single in forever. It's a single off my upcoming Jaguar album, Epiphytes. It's a pretty simple wee tune, really, but there's a few interesting bits, so I thought let's have a chat about it. And perhaps one of the more interesting things is that this is where it started. It started with this piano line. As usual, I'm using Bitwig, but I'm not really going to focus too much on software-specific things. So that's pretty insane when you listen to it on its own. And what I was trying to do there is I've basically taken a kind of simple piano line that, as you can see, is in G major. I've made a note for myself. And that just kind of repeats round and round over a sort of a largely 4-bar phrase, but something must be going weird there that I bothered to make it stretch out like that. Anyway, and then I'm sending that into a series of MIDI effects that basically create an echo, but a MIDI echo. So it's not a delay pedal kind of a sound. It's actually just adding more notes, which is in the second channel here. And I basically rendered out a whole chunk of that. So that's looking pretty balmy, if I can remember how to view the whole thing. Whee! All right. And so those notes are, as I said, an echo on top, but a crucial thing is they're a transposing echo. And I modulated the amount of transpose so that it's kind of shifting around to an LFO, as well as modulating the delay time, as well as modulating the number of repeats. So basically put in a bunch of what may as well be randoms, sort of randomness, and then I grabbed a bit that I liked and chopped that out and put that into the main mix. And you can see that started in G major, but actually I, having riffed on sort of G major for ages with this track, I actually found that it wasn't really working the way I wanted, and in the end I shifted everything into the relative minor, so everything's operating in E minor apart from that piece and the very first sounds that you hear in the track, which are down here. And those very first sounds are mallets. So it's just this one kalimba sample. Excuse me while I scroll around. So this is the raw sound. Or not. Come on, buddy. There you go. Bang. And I've just loaded that into a drum machine at different pitches. So basically a little sampler playing back at different pitches and then sequenced a little rhythm out of them. And I've got two different versions of that. One's paired back and is just playing the root and the major 6 and an octave below. And then there's the second pattern, and the second pattern introduces a major 3rd on top. Hang on. That second pattern, I'll play that now. Come on. Yeah. And then I'm running all of that into an amp emulator, and the amp emulator makes a good screaming sound on top if I turn off this filter. So it kind of adds this ringing tone to it, but then it's a filter that's got an envelope follower on it, so it's kind of gating the top, I suppose. So it's like chopping out that kind of ringing effect, and to me that makes it something reminiscent of a triangle, like someone, knocking away on a triangle part. Yeah, and I really liked that. So then I had that going. I had the pianos on top. Piano started to confuse me entirely. I was sort of getting a bit lost in like, hey, I did this thing that I thought was technically kind of fancy, but I actually can't make it work. So I went back to just keeping things really basic. So this is about the most simple rhythm ever. A little drum machine, bass drum, and rim shot going tick. That click, I won't bother to go and find it. Oh no, here it is, right here. That click's running through another classic free plugin that I've used a lot, the Valhalla Space Modulator. That just gives it that sort of stereo tight sort of slap kind of feel. And then Roth Air is another free plugin that is ancient. It's one of those ones off KVR Audio, if any of you nerds out there know that site. And then what's fading in here into the mix is another of those ladder filters, which we heard on the kalimba part, and then that's running into a massive echo. And this is another instance of, oh no, sorry, it's a different Valhalla freebie. This one's super massive. And of course I stop talking as the thing stops. Yeah, it's one of those things where kind of once I've got that right, I just could listen to that for hours. So very happy with that little simple thing. After the bridge section, I then add an actual triangle part that kind of complements the ringing sound in the kalimba. So, and there's nothing sneaky happening really with the triangle. We've got 3 different triangle samples sitting in a drum machine being triggered. But if I put the mallets back in, yeah, there's kind of those 2 layers of kind of ringing, ting, ting, ting kind of sounds, which I really like. So next up from here, let's go back and check out some of the kind of harmonic content. So I've got 1 chord progression throughout the entire track, because why not? And it's being played on 2 different instruments, so let's listen to those together. And as I mentioned, this ended up being an E minor, so 4, it's an 8-bar progression, but 4 chords. And I was obviously caring a lot about the top line, as in like what note's sitting on top in terms of the chords. So I've got some inversions going on here. It looks like we got, well, the first one's just a real basic, so it's just, an E minor 7. Then it looks like that's the second inversion of B minor 7. Yeah, yep. So yeah, so E minor to the 5th, but inverted twice. Then that looks like, oof, come on brain. So that's going to be a D7. So like that says in a D major chord with a minor 7 sitting on top. And back to the second chord. So that pad sound is just 2 polysynths just playing, and they're hard panned so that they're doing slightly different things in terms of modulations that are altering the sound a little bit to give a real stereo width to it, just kind of make it a bit thicker, I suppose. And then the other thing, which I imagine Lily named chords. It's more kind of staccato sounds. It's just another polysynth playing a short thing. It's running into a convolution reverb. Nowadays I'd probably just do that in the native Convolver, but this was Melder Convolution Multiband. And it's using an excellent kit of impulse responses. If you know about convolution reverbs, you basically record a sound inside an environment, and then you can kind of make anything sound like it was in that environment. And this is from a set from a guy, Tim Preble, also here in Wellington, New Zealand. He has a company called A Hiss and a Roar, and this is a pack of impulse responses where he recorded inside a glass jug in this case. So if I turn that off, yeah, so a real bass kind of saw kind of feel to that synth, or sort of triangle perhaps, well, saw, and then now it's back in a jug, and then there's just compression after that to try and kind of, you know, keep it a bit more consistent. Very basic bass line. Almost stupidly low. The phase 4 is just a phase distortion synth, so kind of a style of FM. If I pitch that up to a normal pitch, yeah, okay, that sounds really dumb. So yeah, and so that's the main track. Oh wait, and then there's the lead on top, and that's another really basic one in my opinion. This is another of the built-in synths, so it's just a sine wave. I often fall back to squeaky sine waves. It's just a ping pong delay. Oh, sorry, not a ping pong delay, but it's crossfed delay. So it's like 5/16 beats on one ear, 3 on the other. And what are these things modulating? Sorry, I should have checked that. So that's just changing the rate of an LFO, which is changing the mix amount. Oh yeah, so the mix amount's kind of glitching in and out. Yeah. So that takes us back to the bridge. And this is a really stretched vinyl sample. Oh, that's not going to show us anything. It's just one sustained sample that we're moving through very, very slowly. And it's essentially a kind of granular time stretch thing, and I shift the grain size till it stops distorting. So that's now like 270 milliseconds, 268 milliseconds, so you can hear a bunch of the character of the original sound, whereas right at the start, because the grains are just stupidly short, it's creating, I don't know what you call that effect, but it's kind of like almost like a ring mod or something. Like it's the grains are coming and going so fast that it creates its own sort of inharmonic distortion or pitch that basically just messes it all up. And let's hear what's actually going on in the track at this point. So I'll just... So looking down the bottom here, I've got 2 field recordings that I loaded in for fun and games. We've got kids chattering, and we've got a car wash. There's something in the car wash that kind of sounded like a sort of almost like a whip or a clap, which I really liked. And the car wash itself is just kind of adding this kind of shimmer or sort of a fluttering. Yeah, that was, I don't know, just a kind of weird lucky find that made sense in the track. Pretty sure I've used this car wash a few times.
What happened? Microphone good, isn't it? Is it? Microphone's just a
Yeah, so that kind of shook sound, it's actually in the recording of the kids. That actually lands on the four, like as a kind of almost like a snare drum coming back into the second half of the track. So yeah, there's some funny things going on here. So this string sample, if I play the original of it, it sounds like this. But back here, it's moving through it at 7% of its original speed. So yeah, hence having that kind of grindy kind of effect to it. And then the kids, if we play a bit of that, so this is an 11-year-old sample from Christmas 2012.
How do you sleep with glasses on?
It's just a microphone.
Is that a microphone?
That is. I just.
That's me. And what I did to this one is I sequenced a rhythm that kind of gets slower and faster, just triggering the same note, but shifting the time. So it's kind of like almost like a trap hi-hat kind of an effect, or like a drill and bass kind of snare roll, where it's going from these are like 3/16 long triggering notes down to these really fast little versions of things. And then what I'm doing is I'm actually then cycling through the sample start point. So I'm actually playing the sample forwards. So if I trigger one note, like the actual sample's not reversed, but I'm playing tiny slices of it in the opposite order. So if we have a look at the sampler, we should be able to see this happening. Oh, I'm in completely the wrong place. So each of those little lines is indicating a new thing being triggered. And I've always really loved just messing around with the sample start sort of offset.
What happened? Microphone.
And if you go all the way back to, I don't know, my first album back in, what was that, 99 or 2000, a track like G Beat, A Bob Each Way, that one is a similar thing where, I was doing it with hardware back then 24 years ago, but I was mucking around with that same idea of changing the length of MIDI notes to basically cycle through sort of different sized kind of grains. Basically, it's kind of like a really manual, chunky version of working with granular synths. So that and that kind of forms the bridge. So we've got a layer of those two field recordings and the crackly string sample and that piano part that actually started the whole compositional process. Then the last thing I added, part of the kind of Epiphytes idea on the album is that I quite routinely take things from one track and end up putting them into another. And I was thinking about kiwi trees. In New Zealand, there's a bunch of there's a common kind of plant called an epiphyte, and an epiphyte is a plant that grows on its host, but it's not a parasite, so it doesn't kill the host. And so I was kind of getting enthusiastic about this idea of kind of like being able to transplant things from one track to another, and hopefully they grow nicely together in a new context. So things that hadn't started out as being part of the same track, almost making my own little mega mixes. And that's kind of quite a common thing I've been doing for years, really. So the last thing that I added in here is actually a trombone part that's from another track on Epiphytes, and I'm going to blank on the name of it, but that's all right. And so I took this trombone sample and just basically played a little melody on top of what we heard in the first part. And that'll be, surely that's granulated, yeah, so that's slowed right down as well. And basically playing chords, or almost chords, and they just sit on top. when the kind of the main part comes back after the bridge. So I hope that's been of interest, and yeah, always interested in any comments or thoughts. Please sing out. This was made in an earlier version of Bitwig. There's actually a few things, if you are a Bitwig user, that I'll do a little bit differently now, because we've got some new features in there. Anyway, enjoy. It's grading honey. Cheers.